Hello, my name is Teresita Blanco, the sister, and today we're continuing with Saturnastra Chalon. This is chapter 15. This particular graveyard had climbing vines of many different types, and the most prominent of the climbing vines were the blue crown passion flowering vines. As for the entrance, they were marked by bougainvillea flowers, and the only spots not overgrown were the doors themselves. And there was a third entrance door that led to the castle grounds, and it lay hidden behind some overgrown hedge plants. The trimming in the garden was done sparsely, and aside from the flowers, the graveyard had about 8 paved paths. And they all originated from the central house, and all the graveyards faced the house. And every so often there was a tree here and there, and some families who worshipped Ortisa had planted trees over the graves of their family members. And they had grown over time. And the trees varied in nature and design, and the tree which usually called the most attention was an arbitrary palm tree. And it was not native to this continent, and it was the only one of its kind there. And it was 100 feet tall and about 200 years old. And the residence of that grave was unknown because the writing was not in English. And we do know of the fellow, and he came from the north with one of the silver dragons, and he went by the name of Philter Alby. And he introduced many herbs that are currently cultivated for the purposes of making potions. The palm tree was planted by the dragon master when Alby died of old age. The grave keeper lived in a small manor in the center of the graveyard, and he went by the name of Victor Fodore. And he lived in this house with his blind wife and youngest daughter. And while he worked, the youngest would look after the wives. And since the lady was blind, she would from time to time be seen talking to people that were naturally there. And this was not to say that she was unique in her perception of dead people. And this power was quite common in Saturnastra, and about 1 out of 5 people had second sight. And still most people choose to ignore the ghosts. With enough willpower, they became unable to see them altogether. And if one was not in the necromancer's business, talking to ghosts was nothing more of a burden than an asset, since the dead rarely had anything interesting to say. The manor itself had only 1 floor, and it was a perfect square with a flat roof and 6 windows, with 4 doors all around. And this design decision made it easier for Victor to get around the graveyard. And the doors of the house were flanked by a flat decorated column, and the burying of the dead itself was usually done by the family members and other higher hands. And Victor's job was to keep the monuments clean and to fight off any would-be grave robbers. And to this end, the aging Victor was gifted a muzzle-loaded rifle. And rifles were not mass-produced as of yet, and only just the bullets. And the manufacturing process of such weapon was a well-guarded secret in Veragerum. And Victor did not take it out all the time, and instead he preferred his trusted crossbow. And he was perusing the graveyard with his short crossbow strapped on his back. And he saw Henry, and he waved, and Henry smiled and waved in response. And he stopped a moment to look at his father's grave, and the monument featured a bust of a man. And he was a marble reflection of Henry's face, and the main difference was that Henry did not sport facial hair of any kind. And over the grave there was a moored safe, and moored safes were a type of iron cage that was designed to keep grave robbers from digging into a corpse. And they were usually rented for some time until the body finally decomposed. And mausoleums were not in use in the kingdom, though crypts were well regarded in some parts. And Veragaro had a crypt under the castle, and the crypt was built like a rat labyrinth, and there were many fake doors designed to trap trespassers. And it was common to find grave robbers in those fake rooms from time to time. This is not important for our current inventory, it just seems like interesting information. And while Henry the Night Guard analyzed his father's grave, the undertaker studied Chalon. And Victor had remembered seeing a widow like Chalon from time to time in the market. Still, this was the first time he had seen him in such a ridiculous outfit, and the bold colors did not match the somber mood of the cemetery. Still, Chalon did have red in his clothing, and red was considered the color of mourning in that kingdom. And the pack and shovel did not inspire Victor too much confidence either. And it was not too uncommon for family members to raid their own family graves. And this saddened Victor, but necessity makes heretics of us all. This is at least what he believed. And Henry eventually noted the flowers, and they were all fresh, and Henry was surprised by this fact. Visiting the graveyard was usually a family affair, and it was done on his father's birthday, and at the start of every month, and nothing invigorated the soul more than starting the month with a reminder of one's own mortality. and it was a sore spot for Henry, though he would never admit to it, and he avoided talking about his father as often as he could. And this was not to say that his father was a bad man. He was the opposite, and Henry was compelled to ask, "Grandpa, you know everyone who visits the grave." "Yes," said Victor stoically, and he was a short, somber man with gray hairs and a wrinkled face, and his most striking feature was his clear green eyes, and the way he spoke was part of the reason why people always referred to him as Grandpa. "Had my sisters and mother recently visited the graveyard?" asked Henry. "According to the logbook, they come with you at the start of the month," said Victor. Chalon vaguely remembered seeing a book propped up on the stone podium at the entrance, and he returned it to sign his name and that of Henry, and it was important to follow the rules of the cemetery before engaging in any necromantic business. And this was part of the reason why all necromancers were known by name, and if they wore their magic without getting proper entry, then it was said that a sphinx would attack them. And this graveyard too had its titular sphinx, and it was hidden away, surrounded by a couple of hedge bushes and a baobab tree facing it. And the practice of having a sphinx statue in the cemetery was a pretty ancient tradition, and it predated the polar guards. And nobody had ever seen the sphinx in action, though superstition alone was enough to keep the necromancers in line, and they would engage in their craft under the condition of writing out their true name. "And do you know the person who gifted the flowers to my father?" asked Henry. "Yes, I know who is that person," said Victor. "Well, tell me who is that person, thank you," said Henry. "You can send the person yourself here, for I am he," said Victor solemnly. "And most people get in that sort of dour mood when being around the dead." "I thank you, Grandpa, or should I say Master Victor," said Henry, bowing solemnly. And Victor smiled and shook his head sadly, and he said, "As long as I live, your father shall not want of flowers." "Did you know him particularly?" asked Henry. "Know him? He saved my life," said Master Victor, "and I am forever in his debt." Henry felt a strong choking sensation in his throat, and he changed the subject by saying, "This weirdo is a foreigner, and he wishes to do right or another for his ancestor, or something stupid. I don't really get it." "Ah, yes, that type of weirdo. Well, I have not seen one in over a decade. May I observe?" asked Victor. "Don't you have anything better to do?" wrote Chalon. "I am old and do not sleep much, so I haven't anything that piques my interest as of lately," insisted Victor. "Do as you will, then," wrote Chalon. And the trio walked among the graveyards, and eventually they found a spot that had a small plaque. And based on the gravel before the plaque, it seemed like it had a monument a long time ago, and the name on the plaque was faded away. Chalon, using a past observation, knew the name of the dead fellow, and he was called Damien Wadge. And the first thing Chalon did was remove his hat, and then he took out from it an elegant monument, and it was a perfect rendition of the man dressed like a harlequin, and on his hand he had his signature weapon of rapier. And the goldsmith was still not budging, and Chalon adorned the statue with a bouquet, and then he drew a pentagram using animal blood he had collected, and the scent of it caused the nearby spooks to rise, and they returned to their sleep when they noticed that the attention was being offered to another fellow. And like us, Chalon did not know too much about the dead man, and according to stories passed down from generation to generation, they might have fought for the rights of homeless men, and he was part of the reason why in society the homeless population received such maltreatment, and in other holes they were commonly bothered by the locals, and some are fortunate enough to be crazed were even publicly humiliated, or even beaten to death. And society was one of the few cities where the killing of a homeless person was criminalized, and not encouraged. Aside from these social wars, what he was best known for was being an actor, and he spotted his message of public justice for the unfortunate on stage was dressed like a clown, and he eventually made his early demise in the same way as the people he tried to defend. And as for our information, we had scarce data on those old days, and we only recently started paying attention to the happenings of this world and its locals. And according to the Aryan master, Damien was registered as a sleeper and not a dead person. Artsa had tried to make him pass on to the next life, but Damien had not budged, and he was still active in the world, but only in the form of dreams. And sleepers tend to have a very tacit interactions with the physical world. Try to make him rise. Chalon tried to make him rise, so he brought out a metal cup with some pennies, and he rattled it a little to illustrate that he needed money. And a couple of the nearby spooks peered their head over their graves, and the frog when they noticed that it was the same jerk foreigner from before. And Victor rose an eyebrow and he commented to Henry, "Is that supposed to do something? You know, digging in a jar of pennies in a graveyard. Tick, 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 tick." "I don't know. Aside from the blood, he hasn't done anything to uninspire me," said Henry, somewhat disappointed. Chalon levitated his chalkboard to rise. "Yes, yes, do on and talk of me, as if I'm not paying the least amount of attention. We've made nothing about it, but what are you trying to do?" asked Victor. "I am trying to wake up a course. What does it look like I'm doing?" wrote Chalon. "Usually one finds the grace open and the course mutilated. You could try that," suggested Henry. "Doing it like that won't wake the real deal and just the negative emotions. Sure, one can channel that to achieve a type of effect, but in the end the real deal will always be more powerful." Oh, well, that was a bit... Sorry for going away for a little bit, but I'm back. Interesting," said Victor, folding his arms, and he looked up into the sky, but he was not truly looking at the moons or the stars. Rather, he was using them as a point of contemplation for his meditations on the immortality of the crabs. And the following thing Shannon tried was the nails on the chalkboard, and this did much fully to wake up others' book, but not for long. And one did materialize completely in the form of a moody revenant. And the spirit gave his angry intentions flesh, and Victor and Henry did not seem too perturbed by it. And the ghost looked at the tree with burning eyes, and it eventually landed its gaze on Chalon, and he took the chalkboard and smashed it against Chalon's head. Chalon rubbed his head, and then he wrote in one of the fragments, "You are no fun." The spirit returned to its grave to continue its restful sleep, and usually to wake up a ghost one had to do as one would do with a regular fellow, and the thing that used to wake the spooks alive while they were lived still worked on the dead. And this was part of the reason why nobody in Victor's house was allowed to slam doors, and it always got the few remaining ghosts all riled up, and whenever this occurred by accident, it was common for books to fall or for the furniture to levitate, and for the people in the house to get ghosts screaming in their face at inopportune times. And it got old after a while, and like the wailing of a fat baby, Victor's family had learned how to tune it all out. And evil people rarely produce ghosts, and they have fulfilled all of their desires in life, so when death graced their doors, they usually died content, with a smile painted on their face, and those that did try to bother the living were usually exorcised by the priest of Artsa. And in Artsa's realm, they would wander about and become exhausted till they were weak enough for the god of death to consume their free will, and without a free will, the ghosts became powerless. Shannon was thoughtful for a moment, and he was looking through the list of items that normally awoke people up, and it was then when Shannon was struck by an idea. And he brought out a dagger, and he released it from his satchel, and it was with this and doing this caused the spirit to wake up, and despite the spirit being awake, it was not rising. It was just observing Shalom to see what he would do next. Shalom reached into his hat, and he brought out an arch lute, and he then played a single note, and the eyes of the spirit closed a little, and Shalom played another note, and the spirit became more restful. And to Victor and Henry, it seemed like Shalom was playing music while looking at the ground. And Victor commented, "Wouldn't it be easier if you dug up the dead?" "It depends. It might not make much of a difference if the person was cremated," said Victor. And indeed, Damien had been cremated, and the urn buried beneath the ground had its ashes, and that of 4 other fellows that had also been cremated while they were still alive. And Shalom proceeded to pluck at the arch lute, and only that he played it with an emphasis on dissonance instead of harmony, and there was not a single chord that complemented the other. And the spirit closed his eyes, and he was making a deliberate effort to tune out the outside noise. And he sunk a bit little deeper into the soil, but not too much, and spirits who sank too deep into the earth tended to fall into the balance of creation. And that place was far too busy and mysterious in order for the spooks to have a peaceful rest. Shalom switched the instruments, and he tried this time using a sitole. And he plucked at the strings a little, and this time he tried to have a little bit of harmony. And the spirit, instead of waking, became more relaxed, and slowly Shalom dug his shadow deep into the soil. And his shadow then grabbed hold of Damien's lute, and he brought him to the surface in shaking him. And annoyed, Damien spoke in a strange language, and he was still not solid enough to be seen in the physical world. Still, both Victor and Henry made an effort to see Damien, and so they were able to. And they were not able to, however, understand what Damien was saying. And Chalon wrote a message in Damien's native tongue using a new unbroken chalkboard. And before the English became known, people in the region had their own languages, and Damien spoke in a language called paved. And during the terraforming period, the area master of the world had different projects per continent, and the theme of this one was diversity when it first initiated. And when the project began, the locals spoke 150 different languages with some 150 dialects, and over time, languages eventually died as people mixed and blended with one another. Before Bertram unified the continent, there were about 27 languages and 13 dialects left, and the language spoken in society during the time of Damien was Manx. And this is not to say that languages remain pure from their inception, and the passage spoken by Damien was a little odd, and Damien asked, "And pray to tell me for what purpose you disturb my peaceful slumber?" And Chalon wrote, "There is a war, and we need you to pitch in." "Pitch in? I do not understand," said Damien. "Help out," wrote Chalon. "Out with what?" asked Damien. "With the war," wrote Chalon, sighed. "There is always a war," said Damien. And he grew a bit solid and somber as he said this, and he went from an amorphous spirit into something a little bit more humanoid looking. And his face was normal, however, and though pale, like a marble bust placed over his grave. And he looked at his bust, and he frowned. And Damien then said, "Who is this man?" "That is you," wrote Chalon. Damien looked at the bust incredulous, and his ghostly visage contorted into a frown, and he was slowly appearing a little bit livelier, and then he looked at Henry and Victor before asking, "And they?" "They are your relative. Henry is a descendant from your niece, and Victor descended from your half-brother," wrote Chalon. "I am not certain if this is true or not. Still, one can easily decipher people's blood relation based on a trace evidence, and it was indeed that both his fellows were of foreign descent. Still, the bloodline had gotten diluted somewhat over the past 200 years, and not everyone belonging to those folk were keen on nomadic life, and not that it was their choice to begin with. And Henry Johnson said to Victor, "I am going back to my rounds, and holler if anything gets dangerous." "Before you leave, can you get the small shell in front of the back garden?" asked Victor. "If I must," said Henry, not too amused, and he left towards the house to fetch the chair. And meanwhile, Shannon was trying to reason with Damien, and Damien had just said, "I am glad to see that my bloodline persists, and during the purge I was as afraid that anyone had been rounded up and burned at the stake." "And no, just you, and the rest recanted, so they got to leave," explained Shalom. "And what happened afterwards?" inquired Damien. "They all lived happily ever after under the yoke of blood red," wrote Shalom. "And he brought order and made roads and unified the coinage and made temples, hospitals, public baths, and the works." "Huh," said Damien thoughtful, and he sat down on the floor as he remembered. And in the end he said, "I guess you cannot believe everything you hear." "Only fools do so, wrote Shalom. "How do I know you're not lying to me?" asked Damien. "Because ghosts are immune to lies," wrote Shalom, and this was indeed the biggest lie we have ever come up with. And even in death, a person can still lie to you, and the only way to be immune is to have the curse of Berserk. And the curse is an endemic problem in this continent, and it's passed on to the blood and the spirit, and telepathy also helps. Still, telepathy doesn't work on magic users for the most part, and the curse does work on them, however. "If you say so," said Damien, not too convinced. And by now, Henry had brought out a chair for Victor, and Victor sat down and then he rested his head on his hand, and he said to him, "Try not to fall asleep, and you may just as easily die from exposure out here, Grandpa." "Perhaps," said Victor, "and you better return to your shift, otherwise Robert will give you a serious talking to." "Yes, yes," said Henry, yawning. And he looked at the night sky, and he noted the time. And it would soon be midnight, and Shaluk looked up, but not for the same reason, and he missed seeing his little brother he perched up in the Titan moon. And the thought of him up there made Shalom feel closer to home. And he turned to Damien and wrote, "You must help us. The king is dying of old age, and there's going to be a power struggle, and it will be foreigners like your family that will be the real victims caught in the middle." "I certainly do see your point, but couldn't they just return home?" asked Damien. "There is no home left to return to," wrote Shalom. "What became of it?" asked Damien. "What became of every place over the course of 2 centuries, and while some places thrived, others faded away, and others changed so they became unrecognizable. The point is, doesn't matter," wrote Shalom. "It may not matter to you, but it matters to me," insisted Damien, coming closer. And Shalom thought a moment, and then he said, "Your guess is as good as mine." And one of the observers' message, Shalom said, "Ask him where his town is located." "And where is your town located?" asked Shalom. "It is up north by the foot of the Tower of Suberus," said Damien. "Oh, that old place. It has been abandoned, and the tower is the only place that is still occupied," wrote Shalom. "I see," said Damien, looking down. And his spirit lost some of his willpower, and thus he became less solid, and then he added, "Other than the wizard, has nobody else tried to live up there?" Well, the mages tend to ward away any visitors, and magic is no longer cool, and even as a fishing town, it is not viable. The reefs have bleached out and died, and so there are barely any fishes there to be caught, wrote Chalon. I don't understand. There must be a way for the wizards to get supplies, insisted Damien. Caravans and teleportation magic, wrote Chalon. More the pity, said Damien, taking a few steps back to face his own bust. Will you help out, wrote Chalon? If I must, but first I wish to know if you are worthy, said Damien, growing completely solid, and in his revenant form he spotted a lamella-like armor, one on top of a red overcoat with black pants and iron boots and gloves, and the sword he used was a scimitar. Chalon shook his head sadly, and the fool was already on board, and yet he wanted to duel. Chalon blamed it on bad influences from the other corpses, and it was common among summons to require a duel as part of the summoning contract, and this failsafe was done to prevent him from being compelled to do work for an evildoer, and depending on the affinity of the summon was the effort that they would put into battle. And if Chalon wanted to get the strongest affinity, he had to force Damien to take the fight seriously. And before accepting the duel, Chalon relieved himself over Damien's grave, and Victor did not see this because he had indeed fallen asleep, and Chalon spat on the false idol of Damien, and then he took out some paints and he decorated the man like a clown. And Damien watched this display somewhat bemused, and finally he said, "Is this an insult, or are you just a crazy person?" In response, Chalon removed his club and he swatted at Damien's face, and since the display had removed some of Damien's battle loss, he was no longer solid. And Chalon wrote, "I am trying to raise your affinity by increasing your hatred towards me, and this will make our bond stronger, and it will make you stronger when you decide to throw us a bone." Bemused, Damien said, "There are better ways to anger a person, and your messages seem a tad infantile." "And what do you suggest?" wrote Chalon. "A couple of days ago, I saw a similar stunt done to another fellow great director, and the necromancer pushed a bunch of animals on top of the graveyard, and they got the fellow in a fit, especially when it came time to put the cat to the sword," said Damien. "I don't want to hurt a cat," wrote Chalon, "and about the best that you're using inanimate objects." "You could try to insult me," said Damien. "Not really my scene," wrote Chalon. "And this is all very silly," said Damien, a little frustrated. "You could just sign the contract and be done with it," wrote Chalon. "No, the ritual must be done correctly, otherwise my powers will be limited, and I have seen this happen before." And Damien came to the sleeping Victor, and shaking him by the shoulder, Damien made the old man awake, and the old man awoke with a start, somewhat disoriented. And he swiftly punched Damien in the face, as he normally did whenever a spook was doing the jump scare thing. And Damien was taken aback, and somewhat confused, he said, is it supposed to hurt?" "Well, the spirit does reside inside the body, and with enough intentionality, a physical being can empower his spirit to do harm to a ghost," explained Chalon. "Huh," said Damien, genuinely surprised. And Damien said to the old man, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" And in response, Victor ignored Damien, in part because he did not speak the language, and Victor sat on his chair to tune out what the ghost was saying. Alright, so I'll continue reading this. That's enough for this chapter. Bye-bye, God bless.